Of course, there was right at 13 inches of precip from planting to harvest in this field. And of course, a lot of that rain came in September, so it's not like it was actually beneficial with regards to the crop, but this does account for all that rain. The in-season irrigation was 9.2 inches. And the soil water use, I based off of the gypsum blocks and the standard water release curves for a Sherman clay loam. I calculated 4 inches of water in the fallow, 4.3 inches in the wheat, and 4.1 inches in our mixed species. So really not a whole lot of difference in water use between those treatments. The total water use actually came out to 26 inches of water for the season, but the water use efficiency, because of the greater yield in that wheat cover, was significantly different. So we had a water use efficiency of 44 pounds per acre inch in the fallow, right at 51 pounds of lint per acre inch in the wheat, and right at 47 pounds in what would be the mixed species. So year one, it really was pretty significant that we did see a benefit with regards to our yield, as well as our water use efficiency, including that, especially the wheat cover in there. This is just pointing out that rainfall already. So of course, what about the cost of our cover crop seed, and how does that affect it? When we look at our loan, this is something I'm going to talk about. This is actually pretty interesting too. So the calculated loan value based off of the quality for the 3 treatments we have for our fallow, it was right at 46 cents per pound. For the wheat, we had 50.4 cents per pound, and for the mixed species, 47.67 cents per pound. So we had not just increase in lint yield, but we actually had an increase in loan value where we had that wheat cover, and that was something that was very surprising to me. So of course, because of that increase in loan value and increase in lint, we had a significantly greater lint value where we had that wheat. The lint value for the fallow was right at $530 per acre. Lint value for the wheat right at $670 per acre. And then where we had the mixed species, $580 per acre. Now, of course, there is a cost for cover crop seed. I did not include a seeding cost. And of course, that's a real cost too. How much did it cost you to get out here and plant this or pay someone to do it? But just looking at the cost of the seed, $16 per acre for the cover crop for the wheat, versus $30 for that mixed species. So that's a pretty big difference right there. But nevertheless, taking that into account, our wheat still yielded, or the return was still over $100 more per acre having that wheat cover. So it's actually pretty significant and very surprising. So as I mentioned, the difference in the loan value, there was no difference in turnout, although the wheat actually was 31% in comparison to 30% for the other two, coming in with the average of all 3 plots. But nothing significantly different. But the difference was right in here with the mite. So with our fallow, the mite was 3.37, right at 3.4. For the mixed species, we were 3.47, right at 3.5. But our wheat, we were at average 3.8. So when we look at that, we consider where we're going to be with regards to premium grade and where that discount's going to be applied. We felt with our wheat, we fell into that premium grade mite range. So that was why we were able to secure that higher loan value. There was really no difference in length, no difference in strength significantly, or uniformity. So in summary, for the cover crop project, we did see a significant response in year one. Although there was a slight reduction in the yield benefit due to the seed cost, but nevertheless we had improved lint yield, we had improved lint quality, and improved water use efficiency. So to keep in mind though, this is what we saw in a year with above average spring precipitation. And this is why it's so important as we look at these projects. It's not just a one-year project. What would happen in a dry year? So unfortunately, this next year, not unfortunately, but we're not going to have cotton this next year. I'm so excited to see what's going to happen with the second year of cotton in this. But we are moving into our corn phase. So we'll have, we'll be able to see, is there a difference? Are we actually benefiting that corn crop in this? So that'll be interesting to see. And then we'll have our next cotton phase. It'll be 2021. So jumping into the cotton conservation videos, as Kirk mentioned, we have what we call our race trials, and leave it up to any educational system or government agency to throw an acronym at anything. This was actually in place way before I started with AgriLife. The race trials are replicated agronomic cotton evaluations. So that's where that term came from. And with these trials, my number one goal is actually to look at variety stability. And so as y'all are making your seed decisions and what variety you want to plant, ultimately you want the most stable variety you can plant. You want something that's going to do well under good conditions, bad conditions, limited irrigated, full irrigated, something that's going to have a lot of flexibility and be, a base hitter. You don't want just something that did good on someone's farm in one place and fails everywhere else. So we're actually looking at stability of early, mid, and early medium maturing early medium maturing varieties. And this past year I actually started with 12 locations, and by the day, it seemed like in May, I had a farmer calling, telling me that either they weren't going to plant, they terminated the field, it just was going south very quickly. But fortunately, we were able to keep several of our northern panhandle locations. We had a location north of Conlin, of course the location here on the district's Water Conservation Center. And then there was also a location up here on the Sherman-Hansford County line that we were able to maintain. So that provided us some really good data for this region. And so with our videos, ultimately we want to provide weekly educational updates on cotton development and growing conditions across the North Plains growing conservation, groundwater district region. I think my acronym. So with that, we also had a weather station at each location so that we could track, of course, the weather, but also those growing degree days across the region. And this really is a response to the increase in cotton acres that we've seen. What's been amazing is that when I started with AgriLife about 6 years ago, there was about 50,000 cotton acres in this region. But over the last 5 years, we've seen the cotton acres grow more in this region than anywhere else, to where there's over 500,000 just within a few years that increased, and of course the whole panhandle increased by 800,000 during that period. And so it's definitely very significant. And as Nick pointed out, it really becomes how are we going to manage cotton for this region? It's not just asking people in Lubbock, how are you doing it down there, because it doesn't apply to this region. So these videos were designed to provide grower updates about what's going on, and so if there was a disease issue or an insect issue or a decision with regards to harvest days or PGR programs, these videos could be a reference for that. So as I mentioned though, we had 3 final locations. We had Conlin, the district center here, and then of course the line, and these could not have been done without the county agents. In Dowling County, it was Mike Bragg, and then Christy Slout and Matt Whiteley actually did the one on the Sherman-Hansford County line, and then I handled the trial here. Now, Marcel actually started with a trial and did one report from a field over with Tommy Cartwright, but shortly after that, it got hailed out and thrips and everything else, and that field was terminated too. So it was a rough year for that. But with that, of course, as I mentioned, we have our weather stations so that we can track those growing degree days of these fields, and these are the DD60s or GDUs or GDDs, however you want to refer to them, all calculated on the same basis. So, of course, with regards to May, we all know we started out very cool, very low growing degree day accumulation. Across the whole region, we are sitting on average about 100. And so with that, that's barely enough just to get the seeds germinated and get out of the ground. June was still very slow, but with regards to July and August, that's really where we caught up. And September held, by October, as Nick pointed out, we were done. What's interesting though, when we actually compare this year to our previous 3 years, our average, we're really not that far off. It's just that 2018 was such a good year, and it was really because of the above average growing degree days that we accumulated in May and even in June during that year. So on average, we're looking at about 2,200 growing degree days per year. In May of actually 16, 17, and 19, we are all sitting about 100 growing degree days for those 3 years. 2018, we are about 300, and that's why that cotton crop got off to such a quick start. When we talk to people on the Southern High Plains, they always talk about cotton blooming by the 4th of July. And 2018 was actually the first year that I saw cotton north of Dumas blooming by the 4th of July. And I'm sure there's fields where it does happen, but regularly we do not see cotton blooming early. And it was because that cotton got up and got out of the ground fast and really took off going with regards to that. But September, we were able to compensate for some heat in September and develop some of those later bolls, but nevertheless, October just stopped everything and we didn't finish it off. But it's very interesting when we come out of a bad year and compare it to previous years. Well, cumulatively, we weren't really that below average, but growing degree days, just like water, it really depends on when they are received and the impact. So this is why it's important that we really do reevaluate this and look at other models, as Nick said, so that we can get a good idea of what's a good model for this region with regards to these stages. So looking at these traditional models, they assume that first flower is going to occur about 500 feet units, so 500 growing degree days. Well, up here it's closer to 1,000, and it is, and we're finishing so much more quickly after that. So we are so much more efficient. So this year's growing degree day observations from these cotton conservation trials and videos really did agree with previous observations. Our new early and medium early maturing varieties do not follow those historical calendars. The new varieties are faster at the end. They are really finishing off very quickly in the end. And so that's something that's going to be very important to keep in mind as we talk about the irrigation scheduling and what we saw with our irrigation demonstration this year. And on average, what we see is squaring late June, early blooming in late July, peak bloom in boll fill starting in August, and then we really do have our first crack boll by late August. So we're fast, we're rushing this through the season. And so as we look at these things and look at the varieties that we evaluate and the different maturity classes, how do we optimize irrigation and improve lint yield with early varieties? But as we look at this, one of the things that really came to my mind, it's not just how do we manage these varieties, but how do we manage these varieties in our corn-cotton rotations. And so, of course, looking at the varieties, it really does become important that we understand the maturity classes. When we look at the early varieties, those are varieties that are going to put on your bolls in the lower parts of the plant. You're going to have bolls at 4th or 5th node, and they're going to be those first position bolls, and those plants are going to hold on to those bolls. Whereas later varieties tend to produce bolls up in the top of the plant. And if it is stressed, it's going to shed those lower bolls because it knows I have time and I'm going to put on bolls at the top of the plant or exterior fruiting positions. Whereas an early maturing variety, it's going to put on those bolls, again, in those first fruiting positions. But if it gets stressed, of course, it could shed. But that plant's also going to naturally start to shut down because those are determinate plants. It's not going to be indeterminate like those longer maturing varieties. And so it really does become how are we managing the difference between these variety classes with our irrigation. So we set up an irrigation demonstration with our variety trial here. We took the variety trial and we duplicated it with 2 different irrigation treatments. The variety trial was planted on May the 17th. We had 6 XtendFlex varieties. We had 3 early and 3 early medium varieties. And we had 2 irrigation strategies, a pinhead square irrigation and then one where we were initiating irrigation at full bloom. Now with this was so that we could coordinate irrigation around our corn crop because we did not, we do not know enough about how we're coordinating irrigation around. And in many cases, I think like what was previously said, we're rushing over that corn as quickly as possible, the cotton as quickly as possible just so we can get back to the corn crop. And so, as we look at trying to manage both of these systems simultaneously, can we optimize the production for both? Of course, there's always a catch. This is assuming that we're also managing irrigation for crops that are planted about the same time. It's not like this is a late planted corn crop in early June or corn crop that was planted the first week of April. We're looking at crops that were planted in mid-May. So with our early irrigation initiated at Pinhead Square, this would simulate where we have irrigation dedicated to a cotton crop. We're not worried about stressing a corn crop. So we're coming in, initiating irrigation at Pinhead Square like you had all your water dedicated to your cotton. And your goal with this is to maximize your cotton yield. Now, if you're sharing water, whether it's a split pivot or just have wells that are split between different pivots or systems, with a corn crop, we don't want to stress that corn crop early. Early on, we're determining our ear size, so that's not a good time to stress the corn crop. By the time we get to tassel, we want to make sure we maximize pollination. That's not a good time to stress the corn crop. So if we withhold irrigation till we get to full bloom, which is actually the peak water demand period for our cotton crop, well, what's that going to do to our cotton yield? So this is our late irrigation, establishing irrigation at full bloom or peak bloom after we have bypassed all of the critical development stages in our corn crop. And at that time, your corn crop's in late blister, early dent, and so you're not as worried about pulling water off your corn crop at that point.